Hello everyone, and here I am for the full moon in Sagittarius forecast, and I missed the Taurus one because I just did not have the voice to record as I was quite ill. But here I am. There's so many wonderful astrologers out there doing forecasts that I'm sure that you got the forecast that you needed for the time of that Taurus new moon, which was 2 weeks prior to the reading that we're doing today, which is the Sagittarius. So did I say Taurus new moon? I meant to, if I didn't, to this 2 weeks prior to this Sagittarius full moon. So I have set it up for where I am, 23rd of May. In South Africa. So just remember that where you are, it might not have Scorpio on the ascendant. That doesn't really matter. This forecast is more about you going into your natal chart and saying, where do I have 2 degrees of Sagittarius? That's where this full moon is. And also all the degree points that we'll discuss here will also come into play, because as you can see, the moon is on this side all by herself, basically, whilst everything else is pretty much piled up on the other side of the chart. So it's about going to see where this full moon is impacting your life more than looking at this particular chart, because this one is set for where I am in the world. So remembering that a full moon always means that the moon is opposite the sun. So you can see here 2 degrees 54 of Sagittarius. The sun is at 2 degrees and 50. Okay, it says 55 there, but it's the same, 54 of Gemini. So those are the opposing signs. Because it's 2 degrees, we know that the sun has only been in Gemini for a few days at the point of this full moon. So remembering that each sign has a 30-degree space, but we start with the 0 degree and we end with 29 degrees. And 0 and 29 are very powerful degrees, and we are going to speak into the 29, because if you can see already, there is some powerful 29ing happening here. And we have also quite a lot of early degree here with the sun and moon in early degrees, not 0, but early degrees of Gemini, Sag, and Pluto in early degrees, same degree, 2 degrees of Aquarius. So we definitely have a very strong beginnings and endings feel. And this has been a bit of a feeling and a rhythm. And the beginnings and endings have been happening in similar or different places depending on the planets and how fast they move. So for example, we've been doing endings of Pluto in Capricorn and beginnings of Pluto in Aquarius for the last few years. This is a slow going process because Pluto's full orbit is about 250 years, whereas ending and beginnings of cycles with a planet like Mercury is much quicker, and we will see those endings and beginnings come to fruition much more quickly. And so this is what astrology is. It's all about cycles. It's all about patterns. And it's all about looking at how the various cycles, planets in their cycles, are speaking to other planets in their cycles. And then I know it gets complicated. That's why you need people like me doing little forecasts to sort of try and simplify a complex system for you until you get the hang of it yourself. So basically, then once you've got all of that sort of awareness, then you take it to your own natal chart, your blueprint. And that's where the planets were at the time of your birth, and they don't move from that place. The planets in the sky continue to move, but they will never move. It's like a photograph of the sky at the time of your birth. So then when you start seeing things that are happening now, current planetary cycles and patterns impacting your personal stuff, then you know, wow, well, that's going to be more impactful for me. And if they are in harder aspects like oppositions, conjunctions, or squares, then you can say, oh, well, that's going to give me a bit of a tug in an opposite direction, or a pressure to change, or that's going to feel really loud and intense. Versus if you're seeing the more trine sextile type of aspects, excuse me, then you're going to realize, well, maybe this is going to play into supporting me with this idea that I've already had going, or some such. So it is a little bit complicated, but if you have, and you can do these free copies of your birth chart on either AstroSeek, which is this one, or astro.com or AstroDienst. Those are the 2 free apps that I use most frequently. And then you will see where that is. And I'm sure I do have a video that instructs you how to do this as well. Okay, anyway, let's get back to business here. So we've got the full moon in the axis of Gemini and Aquarius. And we already know that the full moon is going to bring in a lot of reflections on Sagittarian things. So Sagittarius as an archetype is the archer, and he's all about, that bow and arrow, seeking out enlightenment, seeking out other kinds of wisdoms aside from his own. He has a very strong philosophical aspect. So there is that, let me go to other countries and let me learn about their religions, philosophies, cultures, foods. Let me explore, let me expand, ruled by Jupiter, who is the expander, right? Let me expand and understand so much more. Let me see so many more versions of truth to come to a bigger collective truth than the kind of blinkered truth that so many of us are brought up in societies and cultures where it's like, this is the religion I was born into, or this is the political belief system I was born into, or this is the cultural or gender, or, we could go anywhere with that. And Sagittarius is like, but what if that one that you believed was so wrong isn't so wrong? What then? Why don't you go and experience that rather than just sit here in judgment? He's that kind of archetype. Also, he's half man, half horse as a centaur. So there is the intellectual human aspect and also the more physical, embodied, instinctual aspect. So as all of the mutable signs, Gemini and Sag are mutable, so are Pisces and Virgo. Mutable signs tend to have some form of duality within them because they can go this way or this way. That's why they're mutable. They're less rigid and less fixed than the fixed signs, for example. So this is a great opportunity for the moon to reflect, where is it that my soul is calling me to expand? Where is it that my new learning wants to grow? I've always wanted to take up mosaicing. I've always wanted to travel to Thailand. Where are those things kind of simmering and bubbling inside of you? Because of course with Sagittarius we're going to want to go and explore in a big way. Then Gemini, the opposite, is also super curious, super exploratory, tends to be in a smaller fish pond though, not necessarily international travel. Let me travel to areas, let me take a day trip to somewhere nearby my town, or let me take a weekend away. Let me get to know my neighbor better. For goodness sake, I've lived here for how long and I don't know my neighbors. That's so you can see always polarity signs opposite each other have similar and different aspects. So they both have this desire to learn, to understand, to connect further than they are. But Gemini is Mercury ruled, smaller details, smaller trips, smaller riddles and puzzles, and Sagittarius is Jupiter ruled, sorry. So it's much bigger picture. We've also gotten out of Mercury retrograde shadow at this point, which means that for a while Mercury had been a little bit dampened or shadowed, or was forcing us to really evaluate our thinking. So coming out of that process and into this Sagittarius moon, we might suddenly have this, aha expansion of our thinking and our ideas and our creativity and our belief systems because of that retrograde. In some ways it might be even more of a burst because we've done let me pull back a little. Why do I think and believe that? That's what Mercury retrograde would have done for us. And we would have been vacillating with a lot of that, particularly around the Aries archetype, which is like Sagittarius fire. So my passionate drive, where did this like life source and fire source come from in me? Why did I always think that? Why was I always told that? And now we have this ability to now suddenly illuminate. Both the sun and moon are bright. Let's illuminate potential other ways of being and doing. And then, of course, we have, this is exceptionally intense here. We have Jupiter-Venus conjunction at 29 degrees. So remember what I said earlier, the 29th degree and the 0 degree of any sign is very, very powerful. The 29th is kind of that archetype in its most intense on the shadow and light side. So it's like, right at this point of this journey, and in this case, we can say for Venus and for Jupiter, of their current trip around the entire zodiac. For Venus, that's about a year to 18-month cycle, whereas Jupiter hasn't been at 29 degrees of Taurus for 12 years because he has a longer cycle. And every time they get there and they go through the process, let's say in this case of Taurus, they start at 0 degrees and then they really have to work through and embody all the lessons and stuff that comes up with the archetype of Taurus, shadow and light, easy and not so easy. By the time they get to 29, they've got the fullness of that sign in them, which means they can come across as all that negative stuff as well. Negative, I use the word lightly. But yes, you can manifest the stubborn, the rigid, the sticking your feet in and just not being prepared to do it any different way, things like that. But also Taurus is absolutely the archetype of, it's Venus ruled. So Venus is at home in her sign here. Venus is also the lesser benefic, so she's a really lucky planet, and Jupiter is the greater benefic. So you've got the two most like kind of lucky benevolent planets coming together at the last degree of a sign. Venus is ruling this conversation in the sense that she is the ruler of Taurus. Jupiter's ruling the full moon, which is happening at the same time. So he's got a lot of play with the two luminaries, the big lights in the sky. So they're both pretty powerful at this point. Usually the further out planet would probably have the extra weight, literally and figuratively. But the point is that they're both lucky. They're both coming together. They are making a big splash, a big deal about Taurus things. Taurus is a strong nod to our value system, how we want to build our life moving forward, how we've been building our lives as well. What are our foundations? How are we think about growing, planting, flowering, fruiting, harvesting. Think about what you are creating. Think of a farming sort of analogy with Taurus and ask yourself what you've been cultivating and how much have I been feeding my soil and how much have I been planting seeds at the right time and harvesting at the right time, because you can't plant your seeds today and harvest your corn tomorrow. You have to learn to work within those nature cycles. And so this is a very good opportunity for us to really see the way forward. This is how I've been harvesting, cultivating, farming my lands, my inner landscape, my family, my life, whatever it is. And this is where I've been doing it sort of that doesn't feel like it's working. And how do I shift that into a more seasonally effective or cyclically effective process for me? So this is something that if you spend a little time with, you're going to get really big insights around here. And of course, they're both still pretty close to Uranus. And remember, we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and then later than that, we would have had Venus before this time, but Venus would have come over Jupiter. So Uranus brings about these like blasts of insight, these sudden shocks and shifts. But I would really also think to when that conjunction was, I did a video on that, so you can go and listen to that if you want to, what sort of insights were coming to me. But not only that, a few days, let me just double check this. Yes, a few days after this, Mars is going to get to the 19-degree point of Aries, which is also going to trigger the 8th of April's total solar eclipse. So when he triggers that as well, there's another blast of what have been my insights. Go back to that time. Go back to a few days leading up to, or even a week leading up to and leading out from the 8th of April. What were the rumblings? What were the insights? What were the aha moments and epiphanies that I was having? Where did I suddenly think, oh, I'm going to change my life? And then maybe that got way too scary, way too fast, and I buried it back down again. That stuff, that's going to get reactivated a few days after this full moon when Mars comes to the point. So remember that becomes a sensitive point, the degree point that eclipse happened at. It's still kind of like a hot point. Just like 21 degrees of Taurus, I think that was the degree point where the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happened, is a sensitive point. And Uranus is still pretty close to that point. Mercury is going to be coming over that point. So these points are going to be triggered in the next while, that just and immediately as the faster planets move past there now, but even say in a year from now, these are going to be continually triggered, bringing up this repetition of, if we try to put that back in the box, you know, the story of Pandora's box, and she shouldn't open it, and she shouldn't open it. Once she opens it, she can't close it again. That doesn't have to be a bad thing. In Pandora's case, the story is kind of a little negative, but it's like if you had these aha, insight, epiphany moments, and then your fear got the better of you because you're human, and big shifts in our life and changes obviously elicit fear. And then you thought, you know what, just don't think about it. Stick with the 9-to-5 job that I have now. Stick with the way that I've been in this relationship. Oh, dog. And I can't actually pause these recordings, which is very annoying. Anyway, these kinds of concepts, let me see if I can get her inside. One minute. Oh, sorry. Terribly sorry. Let me just make sure she can't get out. Okay. Okay, so if these fears were coming up with your attempts at listening to these little intuitive hits that you were getting, and you didn't act on them in that moment, that's okay. That's like a seed. And again, you can't harvest from the seeds the moment that they are planted. So then maybe now Mars goes over that eclipse point and something triggers a little harder. And again, you go, nope, nope, I'm not ready. But that's maybe a little infusion of water or fertilizer or sunshine. And over time, when you are ready to take the next right action towards something, you will. So just try to be gentle with yourself. If you think to yourself, oh, you know, I knew that then, but I should have done it then and I didn't. No, you do it when you do it. We'll get to the thing we get to in divine time. Okay, there's always so much to say, and I want to keep it a little bit. Oh, another interesting thing just to mention here is that we have Neptune, outer planet, very slow moving. She is at, or he is at 29 degrees of Pisces. So we'll start its journey into the next archetype, Aries, next year sometime. But in the meantime, that's another 29 degrees. So we're really eking out that journey. And because it's in Pisces, which is a water sign, it forms a sextile to these planets here. So it's kind of supporting the dream, the ideal, the wish of these things. And it puts us in a super fertile, imaginal realm to kind of figure out how to completely change the way we've been farming. I know I've always done it this way, but now actually, let me just imagine and dream my way into a completely different thing. So that's very powerful as well. And then, of course, because Pluto is the same degree as the moon, and they are in air and fire, that's a sextile. They're working together. And then here is a trine to 2 degrees of where the sun is of Gemini. So that's also a positive aspect. So there is a Pluto's big transformative stuff that we've been feeling and dealing with for some time already is really supporting the light of this lunation, saying, all right, so this is a positive change. Let's get with the picture. So we get to feel a bit more positive about it than if Pluto was in a tough aspect, really forcing us to do the hard work. Here, he's encouraging in a much more like, you know, you're doing great, go get them kind of way. So that's quite nice to know as well. And Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, we've been dealing with this for a little while. There's a lot of watery influence coming, watery disciplines coming. We may be recognizing things about like flooding and toxic water situations. And sort of strange watery stories. It's very much about disciplining ourselves. And even here, if we go back to the farming analogy, where this can really play into the conversation in a way, because this is also a mutable sign, by the way, but where this can really play into the story is, how are we doing with our fisheries? How are we managing our oceans? Like, yes, we think about our land, and we think about if there's enough place to farm and if there's enough space to build homes and that sort of thing. But are we being as respectful and responsible with our water? How is the water? I mean, I live in a very water scarce area, but also badly managed water management systems. Like, really, it's a bit of a crisis. So how is that being managed? And is that stuff getting more and more highlighted? And again, although it's square to this lunation by sign, but not by degree, so it's something that's been playing out in a longer story, but it is very much about, we need to get more responsible for our resources. Basically, we need to really start being respectful of our resources and responsible for our resources. And I think that is what I'm going to touch on today, because there is so much always to say, but I think it's getting quite long now. So I'm going to say thank you very much. Let's stop sharing. Thank you very much for being with me. Remember to like, share, follow, subscribe, so that I can keep following on with more videos like this. And thank you for your patience while I was unwell. And I look forward to seeing you again at the next forecast or my next card readings. If you don't watch those, check those out as well. I do them weekly.